It has been about 6 weeks since I made my first Grainfather brew, and this is the beer. It's nearly gone actually, we've nearly drunk it. I don't know how that comes out on the camera. So this was the Pale Ale number 1. It's turned out pretty nice. Beautifully clear, quite a nice light colour. Nice malty flavour, quite a bit of body in it, which I think is down to the yeast that was used. So I thought I'd give you an update on where I'd got, and also share some tips from my experience of using the Grainfather. I've done 4 brews now. So impressions, really pleased with the Grainfather, works really well. I've done a lot of grain brewing in the past and I wanted to get back into it, but I didn't want to turn my entire house into a brewery. I needed a small footprint, something that was simple, make the whole process more pleasurable, and the Grainfather certainly come up trumps on that front. All the brews have gone smoothly. I've got the OGs that I needed so far. The beer's come out well, the one that I've tried. Very popular, it's nearly gone. Friends have liked it as well. But I picked up some tips along the way and refined my workflow, I think, to make things easier. So I thought I would share those with you and give my impressions as I go along. So let's talk tap connectors first. Soon after you get your Grainfather, you're going to have to work out how to connect your hoses up for the cooler. And I had a bit of a problem because I've got these peculiarly shaped taps. The solution was this, which is made by Hose-Lock. You can probably get other ones. I got this from B&Q. You can get them from garden centres, I would think, of anybody that sells hose pipe type paraphernalia. They call it a mixer tap connector, but really it should be called a peculiar shaped tap connector. So these aren't mixer taps, but it works a treat. It goes on like this, and then you clamp it on like that. It's got a standard hose pipe connector there, and that was the perfect solution for me. I then made up a length of hose like this, 2 ordinary snap connectors. This then goes onto the chiller unit. This goes on here. Connect that to the Grainfather chiller pipe. That extends the range of where you can place the Grainfather. I also found this was really handy in that you can fill the Grainfather itself up with its mash water. You can fill your sparge container up with your sparge water, and it's really handy for washing out bins and fermenters and things like that as well. So that's handy tip, quite cheap. Also, you might want to use your tap during the hours that you're mashing, and with this you can just turn your tap off, disconnect it, fill your kettle up or whatever, reconnect it, and you're off. So that worked for me. That might work for you. So it's brew morning. The Grainfather's on and coming up to temperature. It's currently at 50. I like to get everything ready the night before, brew in the mornings, get the grain bill ready, all weighed out, get the water in the mash tun ready to go the right length, set the temperature up on the Grainfather for mash, put all the settings on the Grainfather ready to go. Some water treatment like carbonate reduction solution needs a little time to work, so I put that in the night before. Then in the morning all I have to do is come down, put the switch on, and 25 minutes later it's ready to go. I have thought about putting a timer on the plug socket, and then everything will be ready before I even got up, but I've not got that far yet. I'll start to add the grain bill shortly. Like everyone who had the earlier Grainfathers, I've got this tiny little gold cap thing for covering the recirculation pipe lid. I don't bother with that anymore, it's a bit fiddly. Some people have lost it into the grain. What I suggest as my tip is get a bit of cling film. Put cling film over the top, wrap it around. Job done, that's not going to drop in. I also found when I'm lifting the grain over, I sometimes drop some around the edge here, and I don't like that because it's going to go into the outside of the basket. It probably doesn't matter, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but I just put a piece of cloth over there like that, so that when I'm lifting the grain over, I don't get anywhere that it shouldn't go, and then you're good to go. So there are my tips. We're coming to the end of the main mash now. It's gone well, that water looks nice and clear, so I wanted to just talk about mash out or not mash out. So mashing out is when you have a stage at the end of the mash where you raise the temperature of the mash to sparge temperature, 75 degrees C, instead of the normal mash temperature of 67. Now I haven't bothered with this until the last brew that I did. Grainfather include it as standard in their recipes. They say that one, it increases the fluidity of the mash, so it reduces the chances of a stuck sparge. I've never had a stuck sparge so far, but that's one point. Second, it raises the temperature of the mash and stops the enzyme activity, so it maintains your sugar profile. So I tried a mash out in my last brew. The sparge was no different, really. It didn't sort of sparge through any quicker, but I did get about 2 degrees of specific gravity more in the fermentation vessel than I had got in previous mashes with that recipe. So maybe the increased fluidity got me better extraction. So I'm going to include a mash out in my brews from now on. So increase the mash temperature to 75. Like that. Off it goes. Turn the heater to normal. Leave it on the mash position. Stay pumping. That temperature will come up. The rise time in my experience is only 3-4 minutes. It's already at 68, as you can see, 69. And then mash it for 10 minutes at 75 before going on to sparge. So my mash out is finished, so I'm going to lift the grain basket for sparging. Turn off the pump. So I need to get this water out of the pipe, so there's a little tip here. Leave the valve open, of course, here. Lift the flexible pipe out of the wort. That lets the air in. And you might be able to hear there the glugging. Lets the air in and the water will drop out of there. I find that then I can take this without any, there you go, leakage out of there at all. So I'm going to sparge. I'll be back shortly. So that's sparging finished. My tip for sparging is to leave the grain basket on the Grainfather until you get close to boil. First brew I did, I took the grain basket off as soon as I'd done the sparge and stood it in a fermentation bucket. And I was surprised at how much wort collected afterward that had continued to drain. So what I now do is I leave the grain basket on the Grainfather until the temperature gets to about 98. Then I lift it off. You don't want it on there when you're getting really starting to boil, because you need to manage that potential for boil over, but I leave it on there until right to 98. That allows the maximum amount of drainage to come out of the grain before you lift it off. Boiling. So my tips for boiling. First, those of you who watched my first video will know that I almost had a boil over and I was blowing the wort and all sorts of trying to prevent that. A good tip I've been given since then is to just have a mister of cold water. Looks like it's going to boil over, zap it, get it on spray mode and zap. And that calms it down, so that's a good tip. I haven't needed it though, because I found that as long as I stir, during the boil up, then it doesn't boil over. My second tip is get yourself one of these long paddles. I started out with the usual plastic one that you can get more easily, and I went to a big metal one. That's because you need to be able to reach the bottom of the boiler. Grainfather recommend that a couple of times during the boil you scrape the bottom gently. That's because you can get shrub and proteins stuck on the bottom, and that can interfere with your boil. Now the plastic one wasn't long enough. This one is long enough. So boil is complete and we are cooling now. This is just the stage where you run it without any water through the counter chiller to sterilise everything. 5 minutes. Okay, my tips for cooling. 1. The counter chiller unit. Grainfather designed it to sit on top of the glass lid. That's really neat and tidy, maintains a small footprint, but I prefer it to be on a stool at the side, and that's because I like to be able to lift the lid and get in to the boiler, because on some brews I add whirlpool hops after the water's cooled to about 80 degrees, so I want to be able to get in the lid. Second tip, and another reason that I have it there, is I quite like to take a sanitised thermometer and put it in the flow coming out of the chiller, and then I can tell approximately what the return temperature is, and when it gets to about 25 degrees transfer it into the cooler. What I was doing, just watch that your hoses don't get kinked when they're really hot, because that restricts your flow. As soon as I'm getting a return temperature of about 25 degrees on there, switch the pump off, put it into my fermentation vessel and cool it as I pump into the fermentation vessel, and that way I'm into the fermentation vessel and ready to pitch in 20 to 30 minutes. It's a very effective counter chiller. I have been asked how to ensure the chiller is empty of wort or cleaner or water. It's quite straightforward, so I'll show you. Turn the pump off. This has just got water going through at the minute because it's just in a cleaning cycle. I've now finished it. Turn that pump off. Leave this valve open. Hold the drain pipe up. Lift this up and wait. You get glugging coming from there, and gravity's just making this empty. Watch this pipe here. You may have just seen that run down there. That's empty now. This pipe is empty. So this is empty. Job done. So there you have it. Those are my tips from my experience with the Grainfather so far. I've enjoyed brewing with it. It's gone well. This is the stout that we've been making today. It's 15 litres. I didn't really want 23 litres of high gravity stout. My OG is short. First time ever. And I think that's because I just wanted 15 litres in the fermenter, and with such a big grain bill, that's a really short sparge. I think if I went for a high gravity short length beer in the future, I would either sparge longer and boil for longer, or I would compensate by putting more grain in to allow for the fact that you're not going to get such good extraction with a sparge as short as in this case 4.5 litres. So I hope that's been some use to you. Leave some questions if you have them below, and happy brewing.